And then will we have a little demo video in the beginning there, Pink?
Are you telling me that you have a way to defer the tax situation there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so the first one I was referring to is a 1031 exchange, which only applies to investment real estate. The second one I'm referring to is called a deferred sales trust.
A real eye opener to see that there are ways that people can use the regulatory framework, if properly structured, to invest 1031 exchange dollars in things that you would not think were like kind to what they exited from. So it was very impressive. I got to say, you are the first one I've seen pull this off, and I'm pretty hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked, and it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The Deferred Sales Trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
All right. Well, hey, that was it. That was a great little introduction. David Young, he's a favorite of ours. And my goodness, we're getting some special digital effects going on here with my video. Pierce, what does that look like to you? I think that's like
sepia.
I think that's like a piece of art. I'm going to definitely do Pierce, you're on mute still. So let's,
that's looking like you're doing some Bruce Lee movie, man.
I know that's pretty cool. Let me try to fix that real fast. Oh, there we are. I'm back.
Yeah, you got some Apple lighting going on, man. They're creative, man. They're visionaries.
Well, hey, we might just have to deal with my video coming in and out today. It's a new development. With the new year, we've got a lot of new things going on. So a few bugs in the works. We got to expect that as we go, right?
Gotcha.
But we are here today because of the Deferred Sales Trust. This is our weekly mastermind. We have today with us Pierce York from the sunny beaches of California, where the weather never changes.
That is not true. The last 2 weeks literally been pouring.
Look at that.
Yeah, nuts.
And I'm calling in from another country today, but as we keep helping people from wherever out in the world has become much smaller with technology. And so wherever we are, we're always able to help our clients and our people, so to speak. And we get people calling every day about the Deferred Sales Trust, what it does, what it doesn't do, who it's for, who it's not for, as well as what it can do for them specifically in their circumstance. And so Pierce, just super high level, what is the Deferred Sales Trust?
Yeah, so the Deferred Sales Trust is an exit plan for highly appreciated assets that you can use to defer the capital gains tax on the sale of any highly appreciated asset, and then you can redeploy the funds and reinvest them net of attorney fees instead of net of taxes. And so it gives you a bunch of extra liquidity to go out and increase your, portfolio and investment, and you can use that money to leaps and bounds ahead as opposed to taking a 20 to 40% cut and using tax money that's taxed. So hopefully that's high level.
Very good. No, I think that was perfect, Pierce. In fact, if you feel like you're being attacked by taxes because you have these highly appreciated assets and you'd like to sell them because, my goodness, not just the weather's been changing, but everything in regards to our assets, the value of your stocks in the stock market, value of real estate, everything's been changing. And it might be a great time to sell, but not necessarily a great time to pay those taxes. So again, if you feel like you're being attacked by those taxes and you'd rather be able to reinvest with the gross proceeds net of attorney fees rather than net of taxes, which could be 3.8% Medicare tax, could be 20% capital gains tax, could be the entire amount of your state tax, should you have a state tax. But if you're in lovely California with Pierce, that could be as high as 13.3%. So in order to take the bulk majority of what you have as an asset and roll it over into other assets, the Deferred Sales Trust could be a tool for you. Now, Pierce, I think some of these people out there that might have sensitivity to flashing lights might have an issue with my camera right now. If you wouldn't mind going ahead and talking about the deal size that makes sense. And again, this is not like a hard and fast rule, but when is it a no-brainer? When is it a matter of more of their situation than it is the dollar value of their situation? When does the Deferred Sales Trust make sense?
Sure. So the number that we've kind of come to that seems to make sense in any market is $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain, meaning that after you paid off any sort of debt servicing that you have, or any sort of other fees, closing costs, anything like that are associated with the actual transaction, being left with about $1 million in net proceeds is kind of the threshold. And we've found that that's because there's a specific kind of like return that you're looking to get. If the gain, right, isn't significant enough, then there's not enough pain associated with it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, for example, if you have a $13 million property, right, and you bought it for, let's say, 11 million, and you have a $2 million gain on it, all right, like it might make a lot of sense to do a deferred sales trust if you're really, kind of like worried about that possibly $300,000 tax. But if you got $13 million coming in the bank and you don't have that much pain, it might not be the right fit. It might not have enough like impact on your decision. Versus if you have a $4 million property, right, and you bought it for, let's say $1 million, and now you have close to $1 million tax. Well, that's a huge chunk of your actual gain. So the pain's a lot greater there. And so there's a nice, that $1 million net proceed, $1 million gain is kind of what we decide, hey, this makes a lot of sense no matter where we're at. So hopefully that answers your question, Jake.
So in the world of cash flow, a lot of times within cash flow, there are certain things that are earmarked or already allocated. So we might say, hey, we got so much money coming in every month or from the proceeds of a sale and a one-time sale, what have you. And then we have to start cutting away pieces that are allocated to liabilities, ongoing expenses, cost of goods sold, what have you. And when we are usually talking about the sale of a transaction, capital gains tax, slice, right? We cut that amount out. Medicare tax, slice, right? State income tax, slice, payroll tax, like all these other taxes, right? With this, we need to understand, hey, if it's $1 million or more, and for most people, not everybody, but for most people, that means 200,000 in capital gains. Is that painful enough? Is that painful enough? Or is that cut, that slice, does that motivate us to take the time, the effort to become educated, to understand in our given situation with what we hope to do with the proceeds after the sale, if it warrants the need of involving a team of people like this to come together with a tax attorney and evaluate whether or not a deferred sales trust makes sense. And of course, the nice thing about that, the beginning stages, is there's no fees, which is strange, right? I mean, what really good tax attorney anywhere doesn't have a retainer, doesn't charge up front, doesn't have an hourly rate? Well, ours, right? So conditional agreement or contract, meaning that you only pay should you actually exercise the right to use or fund a deferred sales trust. And once funds hit, then the attorneys take their fees, and we have a trustee that helps you with the trust. We have a CFO type financial advisor, which is usually me, and we help you make this thing happen. And in fact, we oftentimes work with your current advisors, your current financial advisor, your current accountant, your current attorney, and we step in for as specialists for this particular transaction so that we can help make sure that you have a positive experience, that before the transaction, you have all the knowledge, all the questions answered, and all the background and history and all the investigation necessary so that you know you are making a conscious, deliberate decision and not just leaving things to hope and to faith and to chance and good luck. And look at that. I've gone white and black, everyone. I kind of like it.
Jake Lee.
That's right. That's right.
Battle of Medellin.
I am in the city of Eternal Spring right now. So anyway.
Love it.
Yes, I do believe my camera is on its last leg. It's coming in and it's going out, but that's okay. We're here for the content, not so much for my face.
You need to get on that new MacBook Pro M2 chip over there, stud.
You're going to get an affiliate fee for the advertisement right now. I just know it, right?
I have no idea. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
But anyway, what was that?
I said, I'll send you a link.
Yeah, send me a link. Very good. I appreciate that. And then also the deferred sales trust. Who is this not for? When does the deferred sales trust not make sense? Because we like to literally in the first 5 to 10 minutes with any client that gives us a call, we'd like to identify whether or not this is an appropriate tool, an appropriate financial strategy for them.
Sure. So it does not make sense for people who want to take the proceeds and use it on personal use items, i.e. a vacation, or they want to go buy a yacht or something, or a Ferrari that they don't want to have any sort of business tied to, or they want to buy a primary home. Anything that's not necessarily considered an investment, and that's what they want to do with the money, it's probably not the best strategy for them. The other thing is for people who don't meet the requirement, right? Who don't have that pain threshold, that $1 million net proceed, that $1 million gain. And, it's also not for, I would argue, it's not for people who are, how do I say this without, it's probably not for somebody who is not comfortable working with a team.
So what does that mean? That means like a personality thing or what have you, right? Because you can't just go to anyone in the United States and have this happen or get this done. Specifically, this oftentimes has to deal with the largest transaction of somebody's life. It's the sale of their business. It's the sale of their real estate. It's the sale of an inheritance. It's the sale of arts and antiquities, which are oftentimes inherited. You can't just go to any accountant or any CPA or any tax attorney and get this type of assistance, right? And it takes a team. So your do-it-yourself individuals, because obviously this is something that can't be done yourself. Or as you mentioned, somebody whose plans for the proceeds are not to reinvest, not to reallocate assets, but to sell off into the sunset somewhere and spend it all. Because literally, this is a deferral strategy. This is a deferral strategy that instead of incurring the taxable transaction today, we're deferring it down the road, which usually allows us to implement additional planning with your current advisors so that combining other strategies, you can take distributions from the trust. And in that way, find exemptions, deferrals, deductions, things that offset the taxes as we go, which are usually much more easier to handle bit by bit rather than the big chunk all at once. And so typically, this is good for people who want to reinvest.
Yep.
This is good for people who want to reallocate their assets. So somebody who's selling real estate today may not want to buy real estate tomorrow, or maybe they don't want to be caught in that window of 45 days and 180 days because just because it's a good opportunity, a good market to sell doesn't mean it's a great market to buy. If the market's high, where are we going to find that discount? It might take 2 years for the market to dip again and for us to enter again. What are we going to do for 2 years in the meantime? Well, we might be able to invest in a number of other types of assets that still give you a rate of return and help your portfolio grow until that next opportunity comes along. So this becomes, well, David Young says it the best. This puts the power of timing back in your hands so that you can choose when to come in and outside of assets.
I'll throw one more thing at you, Jake. I had I don't even want to call them a client because they decided not to do it because this wasn't for them. And their risk tolerance was so low that they were not willing to put money anywhere except in a CD that would earn about 1%. That's all they wanted to reinvest in. And at that point, it was like, honestly, like you might as well just pay your tax now and, let your money sit in the CDs and earn your 1%, because, delaying it without reinvesting the proceeds doesn't make any sense. And so there's a certain, I would throw that person in there too, right? That person who's so afraid of investing in anything that they just want to sit, in either cash or in an investment that doesn't yield any return, where the attorney fees, the trustee fees, and the financial advisor fees would just eat away at their pie. So I would add them in there as well.
Very good. Okay. Well, now that we've talked about who it's not for and a little bit about, very general, very high level who it is for, let's get specific, Pierce.
Sure.
Let's talk about some of the people you've met with this week, some of the discussions you've had this week, and just high level, as specific as you feel comfortable. Tell us about some of the deal stories that have either closed or that are in progress right now.
So I'm actually working with a gentleman right now. We had a good first discussion, and he actually has a highly appreciated stock that went up about 3,000%. He didn't name the stock, so there's more follow-up to be done there, but he was very interested in how this whole thing works. So we kind of walked through a little bits of like the mechanism of action and exactly how the process works. And he was trying to wrap his head around this idea of what his big holdup was is how does the trust, right, not pay the tax? And what I was trying to explain to him is like, when you sell the stock to the trust, you get a note. That's a transaction, but you just haven't taken constructive receipt yet. Well, when the trust liquidates, their basis is already at the gain. So basically, right, hypothetically, you bought a stock for $1, it goes up to 3,000, right? We're selling it at $3,000. So our gain is 0, right? And he wasn't able to wrap his head around that idea that the trust is buying it at 3,000 and it's selling it at 3,000, right? Give or take the stock market, whatever, right? But for the most part, right, there's very little tax implications at that point. And so, that's kind of what we were talking about. And, you could see it kind of like turning a little bit in his head and so on and so forth. But I say that because, this guy's in Newport Beach. he's done well for himself. He's got multiple properties that are, very high net worth. He's obviously made good investments because his, at least one good investment, right? Because his stock is up 3,000%. So he's not stupid, right? He's a smart guy, but he was taking like such a long time to grasp what we were talking about. Now, that could be me not being good at explaining it and so on and so forth, right? Like, I think I have a pretty decent, understanding of it, and I feel like I can simplify it relatively decently. So, but it's just an abstract concept to a lot of people. And so they've never heard of something like this before, and if they think that they have, right, they haven't heard of it done our way, with our team, with our people, with, whatever. And so there's skepticism right off the bat. They look for holes, and I welcome that, right? That's the whole point of what we're doing right here, right? And we usually start off with, what's the vision? The vision is this place, this community where people can come and they can learn about the Deferred Sales Trust, learn how it works, why it works so good, try and ask their questions, get their question answered, try and poke holes in it. Like, our mindset is bring it on. Like, we got absolutely nothing to worry about. We have 26-year track record, billions of assets under management, thousands and thousands of closes, 20 plus audits and reviews, 0 changes, 0 findings from the IRS, like FINRA. Like, who does that? Like, who has that? It's just, I think you said there's one other strategy that you've seen, Jake, that actually has a track record like that through the IRS. That's like Michael Jordan and LeBron James right there. Like, you're not getting better than that, So,
Absolutely.
those are just some thoughts. So, thoughts on that, Jake?
Yeah. So just adding a little bit to what you mentioned, in the sense that this is a tried and true item that has been, I like to say, tested by the IRS. Whenever something occurs enough times, well, eventually, just by the law of large numbers, the IRS takes a look at it, or has taken a look at it. Because simply with so many taxpayers, with so many filings, with so many of everything else, eventually your name gets pulled out of the hat, right? And with that being said, it's kind of like a confirming moment, or confirmation that, hey, things are either good with this or things are either bad. And a lot of times that happens when the IRS, sends out a notice letter and they say, hey, please provide us with more details. Or they ask for a review because some of the details are interesting enough that it warrants a closer look. And a review is just kind of like a high level item where they cursory glance, just, an explanation of some kind or another. Now, should it be interesting enough because it's a high enough dollar value, or there's a lot of extra interest in the transaction that happens, which one of the cases, Pierce, was $120 million skyrise condo in California. That, obviously, the IRS wanted to look at that, as well as the state of California, and they asked for not just a cursory review, not just a minor or light audit, but a full-fledged deep dive audit. And in a very short period of time, because usually deep dive audits take a long time, especially when we're looking at $120 million transactions with foreign ownership and a lot of other complexities involved. In a matter of 2 to 3 months, this was all taken care of. And of course, the IRS couldn't find anything. The state of California couldn't come up with anything. There was 0 findings and 0 changes. That's incredibly important to understand, because when it comes to strategies being tested, as I would call it, no taxing agency ever puts their stamp of approval on any strategy. They don't do that. That's not something that they do. But if they can't find anything wrong with it and they don't disallow it, that's almost like a seal of approval, without it being a seal of approval, if that makes sense. Essentially, that means that if other people can do it, and the IRS took a really deep dive look at them and their transaction, that should give you a level of comfort that you could do it. Similar, if you have the same recipe, the same people, the same tax attorney, the same strategy, then you should have a similar experience with your transaction. And that gives people a level of comfort. There are strategies out there, Pierce, that are brand new, where they might be basing it off of something that's similar, but in a different circumstance, a different type of transaction, different environment, different product, different something that isn't the same, right? And they, to some extent, might be following logic. They might even get an attorney opinion letter that says that this should work. But in some respect of the transaction, they're kind of throwing the dice. Because the IRS could come back and eventually disallow it or disallow the future use of that. This could be a loophole for some, I'm talking about other strategies, that might be considered a loophole that the IRS decides to plug. Now, that's an example of the IRS saying, hey, all the people that did this before, you're fine, no problem. All the people who are looking to do this later, no more, never again, whatever. When something has been tested like this, there's a level of assurance and comfort that you can do the same thing that somebody else did. Hey, if I'm going to go sell a sky-rise condo, if I'm going to go sell a penthouse, if I'm going to sell a highly appreciated stock, if I'm going to sell warrants to stock, if I'm going to sell a contract for a commission or something of that nature, if I'm going to go sell inventory, if I'm going to sell my business, and it's over $1 million, and it makes sense because the tax payment is significant enough for us to involve the attorneys, for us to involve all these other people, for us to sit down with your CPA, your financial advisor, your attorney, your trusted counsel, whoever's nearest and dearest to you. It could be your spouse. Then this could be something that more so than just logic, but by history, you should feel comfortable with something like this moving forward after, of course, you have all the details and all your questions answered. And that's why we're here. That's why every Friday we come online. We share deal stories of the week. People who are helping right now, not just talking theory, but talking real life and helping people hopefully relate. Not too long ago, Pierce, we helped somebody with a $4.2 million warehouse. It was a sign company in the state of California. They made signs and, they weren't even using their entire warehouse. They didn't need it for the production of signs like billboards. They were approached because of the zoning of where they're at and the permits that their building had. They could be in the cannabis space, or their building could be used for cannabis. So these cannabis growers approached the owners of the building. Again, the owners have a sign company. They can make signs out of any building, really, but they've owned this warehouse for a long time. It's appreciated quite a bit. And in addition, the people who wanted to buy were offering a premium, an extra $500,000 more than fair market value. Because for them to get a permit to grow cannabis in a warehouse, it would take like 1 to 2 years. Mm-hmm. So for them, it makes sense to offer a premium on a warehouse that's only worth 3.7, but hey, let's give them 4.2, motivate them to move quickly so that, because for them, time is money. Let's get their building and let's get in operations. And we were able to help the sellers overcome an issue because they were first counseled by their CPA that, hey, maybe you should look at a 1031 exchange, but they really didn't like the idea of a 1031 because they didn't have another piece of real estate they wanted to go into. Where they could actually make their signs and everything out of is a building that is much smaller. So 1031, the values didn't line up, as well as, well, shoot, they wanted to spend some of the money. Until we came to the table, the transaction didn't really make sense for them to sell, even though they could sell at a premium and get a much larger dollar value. So we saved the day, so to speak. We saved the sell anyway. So the people involved with the merger and acquisition of this warehouse building obviously thought we were the best thing since sliced bread, or they're heroes, what have you. But all we did is educate them on a strategy that is lesser known. It's not something that your common professionals out there know about. We help their professionals all come to the table and get educated so that as we sat down with the clients, everybody nodded their head that, hey, this makes sense. Yes, I understand this. And at the end of the day, we all shook hands and they were able to sell their warehouse at a significant profit, as well as a significant premium above and beyond fair market value. And the other people that were buying were able to buy it and move quickly rather than wait a very long period of time to try and get zoning permitted for a different building that they already owned.
That is very interesting that you said that, Jake, because I actually met with a client yesterday who has cannabis warehouses. She has 2. And she wants to not only sell the building, but she wants to sell the business too. And so I was talking to her and I was explaining to her, I was like, look, like you can do a 1031, right, with the building, right? But you can't do a 1031 with your business. And so this strategy, right, fits perfectly in line with that because she's got a full-fledged operation going. She wants out. She's old. She's ready to get out of the industry. She wants to sell the business for $2.4 million. It's a very lucrative business. She's very well connected. She's like the OG of LA weed. I mean, she's been doing it for a long time, and she knows what she's doing. She's got really good operation. One of her operations is really poor because another partner is pretty much managing it, right? And he's not really listening to her. And after meeting with her and deep diving with her and labeling and mirroring and all that stuff that Brett talks about and all that stuff, right? I've uncovered the fact that basically her partner is kind of doing what he wants and he doesn't know what he's doing and she's over it, right? So she wants out. But how do you get out if you're going to have such a huge tax implication, right, on the sale of the business, right? And so that's where we come in. That's where we explain to her, hey, you can sell the business, right? You could sell the business for actually less than you wanted to and still make more money using the deferred sales trust than you could if you were to just sell the business at the current market price. So that's very interesting that you said that because I wanted that distinction is important.
Absolutely. Well, in your example, we're solving more than one problem, not just the sale of a warehouse, but the sale of a business.
Yep.
And well separating from a partner.
As well
yep.
as yes, a business continuation plan, so to speak, or at least the resolution of a partnership dispute or a partnership disagreement, so to speak. And so it ends up being a happy exit rather than, the contrary of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Now, again, that's why we talk about deal stories of the week or the people that we're currently working with, because again, the Deferred Sales Trust, there's a recipe for it. There's a solid way that it works with various tax codes, everything else. There's a reason for how it turns out the way that it turns out, just like a cake, if baked correctly, if all the ingredients are put in correctly, if, all the instructions are followed correctly, it comes out as desired, right? But to a certain extent, it can also be customized in respect of these different scenarios that Pierce and I have been talking about. It can be customized to help provide a solution for some of these clients who had otherwise, have a otherwise negative outcome or a highly taxed outcome or a partnership issue, etc. Oftentimes, though, as we mentioned, we are solving one issue here, which is, hey, let's not pay the tax today. Let's defer it down the road. With the Deferred Sales Trust, we receive the gross proceeds into the trust rather than receive it personally. It is then managed by the trust, the trustee, and of course, the clients, the beneficiaries, who are now creditors of the trust. They manage the trust and the assets inside going forward. And we're able to then incorporate other goals and objectives and coordinate the Deferred Sales Trust, which is one tax advantaged wealth management strategy, with other tax strategies or investment strategies moving forward to help improve the client's otherwise goals and objectives going forward, to enable or to liberate them to invest in what they wish to a certain extent, as well as to take distributions which would otherwise be taxable, but to take distributions in years or in moments when it's most favorable to them from a tax position. And case in point, we had an individual who sold a series of, sorry, I hit the wrong button instead of the video button. I was hitting the sound button there. We had an individual who sold a series of mobile home trailer parks. And, he did really, really well, made his money and made his earnings that way. Wasn't interested necessarily in paying an enormous amount of taxes and trying to reinvest the net proceeds. He saw the difference being so great in what he was selling and what he had to pay taxes in, and what he could invest if he could just invest the gross proceeds. But a 1031 exchange was not in the mix for him. He wanted to diversify out of his local area. He wanted to diversify out of real estate as well. And so we were able to help him do that. There was a slight debt over basis issue because every time he'd buy one park, he'd improve it, then he'd borrow against it. He'd use that money to go buy another park. He'd improve it. He'd spend more money. He'd borrow against it again. And with that continual business model, which is very common, he incurred debt above basis, which if he were to just sell and pay off all that debt, there's what's called boot. Now, boot, or debt over basis issue, is when you've received loans above and beyond your basis. And if we get rid of that debt, if we eliminate that debt, that becomes income to you. So it's a loan until it's paid off. But if it's above your basis, then there's no more basis or owner given capital to return. And because there's no owner given capital to return, there's an economic benefit to paying off that debt, and you have to pay taxes on it. So what did we do for him? We coupled the Deferred Sales Trust with a Delaware Statutory Trust Fund that accepts large percentages of debt. I believe for him, we were able to receive a 76% loan to value portfolio, where from the sale of the property, he only had to move a very small amount of cash into this instrument that accepted all the rest of his debt, which then meant that he didn't have to pay any taxes on the loans that would have otherwise been forgiven. He was able to move that into a financial instrument that accepts debt. And the rest of the proceeds went into the Deferred Sales Trust, of which he was able to accomplish his goals, diversify his investments, put his money into some other businesses outside of real estate. And he was a very happy person at the end of the day. He was able to accomplish all of his goals, invest in several more from an asset perspective, a much larger portfolio, because he could do it with the gross proceeds minus attorney fees rather than minus taxes.
So that's an interesting, story there. And it brings up a question that I get, I wouldn't say super regularly, but every once in a while I'll get this question. It's, my basis is $1 million, right? And I have no debt. Can I take the $1 million and then put the rest of it into the Deferred Sales Trust? Let's say it's a $5 million asset, right? Can I take $1 million and then put the $4 million into the trust?
If your basis is $1 million, what we should do, so here's the thing, Pierce. As things would have been taxed going in, they'll be taxed coming out. And so if 1/5, because it's $5 million and one of its basis, and the 4 million is growth or gain, if that is kind of like a 20% basis type item going in, so 80% of that would be taxable coming out, and we put all of that into the Deferred Sales Trust and we take out $1 million, well, 800,000 of that would be taxable upon the $1 million distribution, because 20% of that would be basis. And so we have to follow the same tax rules of the asset going in when it comes out.
So you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Well, in a certain respect, you can, if you then couple the Deferred Sales Trust with other tax strategies for that $1 million distribution, such as charitable giving strategies and a number of other things that we do with our clients to help mitigate smaller transactions rather than the very large transaction.
Yep. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think right now at this point in the mastermind is when we open up for questions.
I agree.
And if there's questions or comments in the audience or the crowd, Micah, if there's been any comments in the chat, please let us know. Identify who the individuals are, and we'll let them speak and ask their question. We also have Lisa Peck from the San Francisco Bay Area, East Bay Area. If you'd like to say hello, we always got to find that mute button.
Yeah, howdy. This is great. I'm in residential real estate, and I'm very, very curious to understand. It sounds like you're saying as long as people can have the money to buy a new home, they can exit their existing home through the DST, assuming they don't need that money to buy a new primary residence. Is that, I'm sure there's way more to it than that, but is that?
Essentially, yeah. So if somebody's selling their primary residence, obviously it's not eligible for a 1031 because primary residents aren't eligible for that. If the proceeds minus basis minus the personal residence exemption, which married finally joined is 500,000. If the proceeds minus all of those things exceed $1 million, well, that's a no-brainer. That's a home run. That means almost everybody should complain about an additional $200,000 or greater in taxes just on capital gains alone. Yet California plus another 13.3 plus possibly this Medicare 3.8 tax, right? Yes, they could sell their primary residence with the Deferred Sales Trust. And as long as they're not reinvesting in something that is personal in nature, like another primary home or that Lamborghini they always wanted, or, you know, as Pierce mentioned, somebody who wants to be on a perpetual cruise for the next 5 years, and that costs a lot of money, what have you, they can use the Deferred Sales Trust to reinvest. They can go buy that portion of that multifamily. They can go start up a business with their colleagues or their friends or what have you. They can invest it in marketable securities. There's any number of things that they can invest in as long as it's for reinvestment purposes and not for personal interests. Once the proceeds are inside of the Deferred Sales Trust.
And what's the succession plan for, how does that part work? I mean, most of these people have been here for 35 years and, you know, they'd love to make sure that their relatives kind of get the money. Is there any benefit still, or does taxation then kind of recapture?
That's a fantastic question. Now, if it's a piece of real estate, and let's just talk about this, because this is going to identify one more scenario when it's not appropriate to use the Deferred Sales Trust. If the goal is that the children receive a piece of real estate, like a mountain cabin or a mansion house that has always been in the family forever, or something that is legacy for the asset itself, not the value of the asset, but the asset itself. If you want the asset to pass to your kids, the Deferred Sales Trust is not the right tool, because the Deferred Sales Trust comes into play when you want to sell the asset. Now, let's say that it is a mansion home that has been in the family forever, but the next generation wants nothing to do with it. So parents decide, well, I want to make sure that we solve this so that our kids don't fight and squander, and so that there's not hate and animosity amongst the kids because of decisions that are made later. We'd rather that they were mad at us as parents rather than mad at each other as siblings when we're not here. So let's sell it now, which, Pierce, you smile, but this happens literally all the time. Literally all the time.
It happens all the time.
Proper estate planning is to take all of these decisions prior to the assets being passed to the next generation, so that the next generation, they don't have to make these decisions. They're pre-made, and that helps provide a continual friendship amongst siblings, everything else, right? And of course, this is speaking very high general terms. But in this type of scenario, so they sell the mansion home. The parents work with us to establish a Deferred Sales Trust. The parents, they change position or legal status in regards to the asset. They were once the owners, and now they become the creditors. They are now, where they were the proud owners of a mansion home, they're now the proud owners of a promissory note on the trust and all the trust assets, which for a small period of time, the trust owns that mansion home. For a small period of time, it owns that mansion home, and then it sells that mansion home. It receives cash, and then it reinvests that cash into other assets. Regardless of the underlying assets of the trust, the parents and their estate own, and I apologize for my video, the parents and the estate, they own the rights to all the underlying assets of the trust. And they can request payment or distribution at any time. Should the parents pass away, which, this is estate planning, right? So we're using the Deferred Sales Trust as an estate planning tool for this particular asset and the following assets later. The promissory note passes based on their family trust or their family estate planning, it passes to their heirs. Whether it's one of the heirs or all of the heirs, however they do their estate planning, they can assign the beneficiaries of that promissory note. And again, the same rights of that promissory note go to the next who are beneficiaries, so to speak, of that trust. Or I apologize, beneficiaries of that promissory note, which then has ultimate control and power and authority of the trust. Now, well, let me explain that last piece that I said, the ultimate power, control, and authority over the trust. The trust has a trustee who is in power and control over the trust. But when I say ultimate power and control, let me build a comparison for you. Everyone here on this meeting, I presume, has once owned a home. And I say that, remember I said owned a home and had a mortgage.
Yep.
Some other people comically will say, well, you know, the bank and I, we own them. But literally you own the home and the bank has creditor rights to your home. The bank doesn't own your home. It has creditor rights to your home, which only means that should for some reason you not perform or not fulfill your legal obligations to pay your mortgage on time, all these other things, the bank, what can the bank do, Pierce?
They can foreclose on you.
They can force payment or they can take the assets. And then of course they can resell them, liquidate them. They can do whatever they want at that point. They have ultimate power, authority, and control should certain conditions be met. Now, those conditions are based on the contract, and every mortgage has, you know, the typical mortgage contracts and deals. However, in this circumstance, you can have additional power and control, ultimate power, authority, and control over the trust and the trust assets should for some reason, you know, the trustee not perform or whatever, right? So essentially, we're giving a lot of this ultimate power, control, and authority to the beneficiaries of the trust, which pass based on other estate planning measures, such as a family trust, will, all these other things, right? And that's kind of how through legacy planning, Lisa, we help families with this transactional strategy, the Deferred Sales Trust. We help incorporate that into other planning that they have already implemented or plan to implement in the future. We make sure that this coincides with their other goals, their life goals, their estate planning goals, their investment goals, so that during today's generation as well as future generation, that their family, they do not lose based on lawsuits and all these other things, as well as they don't lose the taxes, their overall net worth that they're trying to pass on.
So it sounds like so I'd say I probably talk to 5 or 10 people a day who are, you know, early to mid 70s, and they're trying to figure out, like, you know, hey, I bought my house for 200, it's worth 2.5. What, you know, how do I get out of this? But I still need a place to live. It sounds like the only way that this is a good solution, or I guess the way to determine who it's not for, is the person who actually needs the money that's in their house, who doesn't have at least $1.5 million, assuming they're married, I guess. Assuming that they don't have the money to go and buy the new home, that person it's not for. But if somebody needs to park it somewhere to invest in whatever Delaware statutory trusts or other properties or businesses or whatever, as long as they can keep the money sequestered to use for income generation as opposed to paying off a new primary residence, that's more so the person that this is for. Is that correct?
If
I dumb it down.
Let me jump in here really quick, because there are ways around it. So actually on this call, we had a gentleman who was kind of in that predicament that you're in, right? Lisa, like, hey, he's like, look, I bought the house for, $400,000. It's worth $3 million. I want to downsize, but I need the money to buy another home. And we're like, okay, basically the home's paid off, right? And so what a strategy is that you could do is you could refinance and pull money out of the equity up to the basis that is that could be used for the down payment. And then the rest of the proceeds after you pay off the loan, right, go into the trust, which then generates income for you on a monthly basis or whatever that you can use not only to qualify for a loan, but use it to pay off the mortgage. And so there's in this scenario, you can kind of have the best of both worlds, because you can work out, okay, look, I only need $6,000 a month, right, to buy this new home. I need $500,000 to put down. Great. Pull the $5,000 out of the home's equity. Use that as your down payment. Then you have the rest of this, $2 million or whatever it is, right, that you're earning. Typically, how we'll structure a note, not a promise, not a guarantee, is an 8% preferred rate of return net of attorney fees and taxes. And then they're generating that. That's $160,000 a year on that. So if you divide that in, that's $12,000 a month or whatever it is, right, that they can go ahead and use to pay off their mortgage. And so, that's just one strategy that we've come up. Being in a similar area, it looks like you said East Bay. I'm assuming, right, you're in the same situation as me down here in Newport. I got a guy who bought a property for $600,000 in the 90s on the sand. It's worth $8.2 million. He sold it. He paid $3 million in tax. Boom, just like that. And so, it's when you get in front of those people, like, look, like, I have a solution for you, right, to solve that. So that is a good way to do it. Assuming they have enough equity in their home, that's up to their basis. Jake, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, being very blunt, if we are just looking at high level, somebody selling their personal home, yes, they can use the Deferred Sales Trust. If their goal is to just put all the money directly into another personal home, then no, that is not a proper transaction for the Deferred Sales Trust. However, if their goal is to reinvest, so get the proceeds out of their current home, capture those, invest those in marketable securities or equipment financing notes, or something that's a little bit guaranteed, that they know what the rate of return is going to be, and that rate of return is going to be higher than what a monthly payment on a personal mortgage on a home is, then it makes absolute sense, as you say, Pierce, to take the gross proceeds, invest them in other things that make a higher rate of return than an interest payment or a mortgage payment on another primary residence. Go finance at very cheap and inexpensive interest rates another personal residence, not with the trust, but you do that personally, and then you take distributions from the trust, which are taxable, but you're earning enough within the trust for it to maintain your net worth, for you to maintain the overall asset. So now you're using your first asset, your first primary home that you sold, to help you buy another personal asset, but you're doing it with distributions from the trust, and you're maintaining the value somewhat of the Deferred Sales Trust. You're maintaining the value of the original home through moderate to conservative investments that are available right now in the market today.
Yep.
So again, that's using the Deferred Sales Trust coupled with investment strategies to help produce the desired goal and outcome of being able to buy another primary residence with a personal mortgage, etc. If the goal is just to take the cash from one to put into the next and avoid all taxes, it doesn't work just like that unless you couple it with an additional strategy, as Pierce mentioned.
And that's kind of like the point of this whole thing, kind of going back, right? It's each person's different, and the beauty of the Deferred Sales Trust is it's so flexible, right? You have the freedom to couple it with other strategies. They're like power ups, right? Like it's just a way to level up again. And so,
Talking like a total millennial.
I know. I'm sorry. I don't know how else to say it. It just makes the most sense, right? Like, all right, cool. Like I can use this strategy, right? And then I can add it onto this strategy, and then together it's like synergy. And it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 4. All right. And you're like, dude, because all of a sudden now I've got this power of control over timing. Now I've got this extra money. Now I've got this other investment strategy that I can use, and this other tactical strategy over here. And if I put them all together, it makes this beautiful, elegant plan that just is seamless, and it flows together. And that's the benefit of the team. They take a holistic view of the entire situation, and they make everything work together and fit together like a puzzle. And it's just like, it's way more seamless. Instead of you have, you know, your typical, how it's typically been done, right? You have your insurance guy, right? And he wants you to buy insurance. Then you have your real estate person. They want you to buy and sell real estate. And then you have your estate planner who wants you to, you know, do certain trusts and all this kind of stuff. And then you have your financial advisor who wants you to stay in stocks and bonds. All right. And it's like Legos and Lincoln Logs and freaking E-Connects with duct tape that you're kind of putting on each other to like try and make everything go. Whereas this is like a single holistic view of everything. Hey, how do these all work together? And instead of it being duct taped with Mega Blocks and Lincoln Logs and Legos, right? It's all Legos, right? And it's just like so much more seamless and efficient and so on and so forth. I don't know. That kind of just popped in my head, Jake. I don't know if you have thoughts about that. If you like Legos or Mega Blocks better, I don't know, but
I like it. No, it's great. It's a great analogy. Now, we are up against the end of our call today, which synergistically, Lisa's comments, Lisa's questions lead us to the very next part. Should you have a very specific transaction or very specific deal that you are working on with your clients, hey, you know, there's a letter of intent, or they're considering buying this, they have to sell that to buy this, or they're looking at selling their business, their home, their investment property, what have you. How do they get in touch with us, Pierce? If they want to reach out to you to kind of see if this is a good fit for them, what's the best way they can reach out?
Yeah, you can reach out to me at the website, Kingdom Luxury Realty. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Living in Newport Beach, California. I'm on the podcast.
Well, very good. Wonderful. Now, if they want to reach out to me, we have a 1-800 number. That is 1-800-773-1848. We have a website, strategictaxsolutions.com, strategictaxsolutions.com. You can book a meeting there on the website as well. And of course, if you want to reach out to Brett, who is usually here with us and today is just not able to join as he's in another conference, you can look up I apologize. That's my website. You can look up capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, as well as with Pierce, there is a podcast. And of course, you can join us every Friday at this time as we present deal stories of the week and we take more questions. So we can talk about your live deal anytime here on camera. You can be part of the panel, or you can reach out to us individually for a short one-on-one. We can evaluate whether your deal is an appropriate deal for the Deferred Sales Trust, and or how we might be able to structure things in such a way, customize the deal opportunity with the best possible tax flow optimization for what the client wishes to accomplish. And with that, I want to thank you, Lisa. I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. I know that more people will be watching this later as it plays live on social media. Look forward to all of you joining us next week. Hope that you have a wonderful weekend, and stay safe. And let's make sure that we don't let the tax man get us, so to speak. Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah.